Hey class, in this video, we are going to start from the medical education and medical system. According to documents, the official medical education has been offered since 443 AD by the government. This medical education was not only offered in the capital for the imperial families, but also in the different provinces for the public health. A relatively comprehensive medical system has been developed during this period. About 200 years later, in 624 AD, an independent medical bureau, including the administration, education, clinical practice, and someone in charge of the materia medica, have been set up by the government. There were different modules in this medical education, including the herbal medicine, acupuncture, therapeutic massage, and the herbal medicine was further divided into 5 different modalities: internal medicine for adults, pediatrics, external medicine, ENT, or the ear, eyes, mouth, and teeth, and also massage. More specifically, it's actually cupping. So these were different modules in the herbal medicine. According to different purposes of the training, the length of the study varies from 3 to 7 years. For example, the internal medicine, the herbal medicine, internal medicine, they need to study for 7 years. Pediatrics, 5 years. External medicine, 5 years. ENT, 4 years. And cupping, they need to study for 3 years. The content of this education, they focus on the theories, the acupoints and meridians. So 黄帝内经 were used as the textbook. 神农本草经, 脉经, and 针灸甲乙经, all these medical books were used as the textbooks. So as you can see, the important books that we have introduced in the previous videos, those actually were the textbooks in the past. In terms of the assessments, there were also relatively strict assessment systems. For example, all doctors or students have to write the tests every month, or quarter, and annually. If someone they fail or they couldn't graduate for 9 years, if they keep studying for 9 years, they still couldn't graduate, they will not be allowed to continue the study. So this is very similar to our modern education. For example, at UJ, after a few years, if you still in certain years, you'll be afforded the opportunity to study. In terms of the medical system, there were different bureaus for different purposes. For example, 上药 bureau or 上药局, 上药, serves for the emperor. 藏药 bureau, 藏药局, served for the prince. 派医署 was the medical and educational institution for officials. This kind of medical education actually was the initial form of the higher education in Chinese medicine. Here is another example of the value of studying the history. If you knew the history, you won't be confused by some phenomenon. For example, there's one question here: can we study acupuncture independently without Chinese herbal medicine? There were some arguments, especially in 2019-2020. We faced a lot of problems with some issues because some professions says that we should not offer acupuncture program without Chinese herbal medicine because acupuncture is part of Chinese medicine and it's only a modality of Chinese medicine. Although in China, most Chinese medicine program will include acupuncture. And then when it comes to South Africa, especially at the beginning, in other higher education institutions, they offer Chinese medicine and acupuncture together. So now the argument raised, can we offer acupuncture program? From the experience worldwide, we can because acupuncture program has been offered independently in China, in other countries in the world for at least the higher education, at least for 60 years from 1955. And then furthermore, if you knew the history, for example, from this video, you will know that the Chinese medicine education was actually started in 443 AD, and since then, the herbal medicine, the acupuncture, and moxibustion were offered independently. You can study the herbal medicine for 7 years. You can study even cupping for 3 years. And acupuncture is an independent modality in Chinese medicine. Although no matter what you study, herbal medicine, acupuncture, or even cupping, you have to study the basic theory of Chinese medicine, the diagnostic of Chinese medicine. So we use the same theory, the same diagnostic method in Chinese medicine. So that's the value. You can see the evidence from the history. Acupuncture was offered independently for more than 1,000 years. The communications with foreign countries. The Chinese medicine has been introduced to foreign countries, especially the neighborhood countries, since very early. For example, the acupuncture was introduced to Korea in 514 AD. This Korea refers to the North Korea and South Korea, as in the past they were one country. In the year 541 AD, the king of Korea requested to the emperor of China to send some Chinese medicine practitioners to teach the Korean Chinese medicine and acupuncture. So some practitioners were sent by the government to Korea. In 561 AD, there's another Chinese. He traveled to Japan. However, in between he traveled to Japan through Korea. He bought 164 volumes of medical works. When he traveled to Japan, he stopped by Korea for 1 year. During this 1 year, he taught the Korean Chinese medicine. So even now, as you can see, although nowadays they call it Korean medicine, but when you go in details, you will see all theories or acupunctures, they were Chinese medicine. They were exactly the same. However, some herbal medicine, they added the local herbal medicine. So as you can see from here, the communications is not only from the officials, from the governments, also the people in the public, they also have private communications. So that's why there's some medical books that were lost in China. Nowadays, we find the books in Korea, from Japan, and those books were sent back to China. There was one book, if I'm not wrong, it's the second volume of 黄帝内经, the one talk about acupuncture and moxibustion. This volume was lost in China, and the king of Korea, he sent back this book as a gift to the emperor. That's how we have this book now in China. Although the Chinese medicine and the herbal medicine, acupuncture was sent out of China to other countries, the medical knowledge from other countries also sent some information to Chinese medicine. So Chinese medicine has absorbed a lot of information from foreign countries. For example, some herbal medicine nowadays we're still using are from Korea. One of the most famous one, ginseng. The ginseng, especially the Korean ginseng, is quite famous because the quality of the ginseng from Korea is actually better. And some other herbal medicine, we will see even some formula, the title of the formula, they will write. For example, there's one formula named the formula of Korean teacher. So it means this formula was taught by the Korean teacher, some practitioners in Korea. So nowadays, when you see the herbal medicine, when you read the herbal medicine, you will see many herbal medicine were actually not origin from China. They were from Korea, from India, from Vietnam. The communications between China and Japan from the year 562, the Chinese traveled to Japan. The one she stopped by the Korea. Eventually, he went to Japan. And he taught Chinese medicine in Japan. In the year 608, there was another Japanese. He visited China, and when she went back to Japan, he brought 300-volume medical books to Japan. And in Japan, the medical education, the medical system, they copied the education and the system from China, so you can see exactly the same education systems in Japan. They use the textbook such as 针灸甲乙经, the same one as China. 黄帝内经, the same one as China. The introduction of Chinese medicine to neighborhood countries also accompanied with the introduction of the Buddhism. So some monks at that time, they want to introduce Buddhism to other countries. For example, in the year 733, there was one monk, Jianzheng. He was invited to preach in Japan, and when he traveled to Japan, while he introduced the Buddhism knowledge, he also practiced Chinese medicine. So he had been staying for quite a few years and teach Chinese medicine in Japan. During the year from 7th century to 9th century, about 200 years, the Japanese government sent students to China, about 5,000 students, to study Chinese medicine and acupuncture, and introduce all this knowledge back to Japan. So nowadays in Japan, we still can see the Eastern medicine because the Han medicine. The Han is Han dynasty, so this refers to China or the Eastern medicine. There's still there are still practitioners nowadays in Korea and Japan. India, as an old country, as China, we have a very close relationship and very close communications between these two countries, especially when the Buddhism was introduced from India to China. When the Buddhism was introduced to China, medicine, the Indian medicine also introduced to China, and then the Chinese medicine absorbed some of the knowledge. In the comprehensive books, such as the books from Dr. Sun Shimiao, 外台秘药, 千金药方, 千金义方, those two books, you will see many herbal medicine were actually from India, and some title of the formula actually named after the Indian name. The Indian and many herbal medicine were actually from India, especially for some spices. For example, the curry. India is famous for the curry, and the ingredient of the curry are now all considered as Chinese herbal medicine. We can prepare the curry from our pharmacy. Although these are Indian medicine, but we use Chinese medicine theory to analyze the function, the indications of these spices. So these are some evidence of the communications between these two countries, China and Vietnam. As early as 257 AD, there were some practitioners practicing Chinese medicine in Vietnam. The communication between China and Arabia, was started in the 3rd century since the Silk Road. So now it is popular with the word Silk Road. Where does the Silk Road come from? Was the one in the 3rd century, the communications between China and Arabia. And we still can see a lot of evidence in Chinese medicine, especially from the herbal medicine. There are so many herbal medicine that's from Arabia that we kept the original name, as you can see from Chinese herbal medicine. Just use these a few countries as an example. As you can see that Chinese medicine is very open to all kinds of culture. Chinese medicine is very open to all kinds of knowledge. However, Chinese medicine doesn't absorb everything. Chinese medicine also only absorb the one we use and the one we can practice and the one is very effective into Chinese medicine. And once they were absorbed into Chinese medicine, practitioners will use the Chinese medicine theory to explain, to analyze the indication, the functions, the functions of the herbal medicine, the applications of the treatment and the methods, all these, and then eventually it becomes Chinese medicine. Here, as we study until now, we will see that we can answer one of our questions previously. Is Chinese medicine very reserved? We don't want improvements. We don't want new technologies. As when you see the history, you see that's also not true. Chinese medicine is very open to all kinds of knowledge. We learn from other knowledge. We pick from other knowledge. We absorb the one we can use. The one is very effective. We will absorb them into Chinese medicine. So in this video, we have talked about the medical educations, the medical administration systems. And as from the discussion, you will see that medical educations has been started from 5th century, 443 AD, and from the different education such as Chinese herbal medicine, acupuncture, or in other categories, the internal medicine for adults, pediatrics were changed independently, and also from the communications with the foreign countries, you will understand that Chinese medicine have very deep and close relationship between different countries, especially with the neighborhood countries. The reason is because of the traveling, the transportation at that time is not convenient. As we discussed previously, as China was surrounded surrounded by the sea, the ocean, the high mountains, the plateau. So these were the direct communications with foreign countries, especially the Arabia. From the Europe, that's from here, China and Europe. In the next stage, we will see some Chinese medicine knowledge were introduced to Europe from Arabia. Thanks everyone.